Foundation, where it's our goal to amplify mental health in communities of color. And during February of each year, we focus on celebrating and recognizing Black History Month, the contributions. And this month, again, we will amplify mental health equity. We will every Saturday welcome you in our Zoom room or welcome hundreds and thousands of viewers from around the country as we stream live on our Facebook page. Again, we welcome you. We want to give a full disclaimer up front. This is not clinical or medical information. We will not be providing clinical or medical information. This is solely for educational purposes. I first want to acknowledge our sponsors and our partners who were featured on the slideshow. Without our sponsors and partners, we would not be able to offer this series for free. We would not be able. We are grateful for the Wilson Foundation, ESL Foundation that supports our peer advocacy workforce initiative, Mother Cabrini Foundation, who also supports our peer workforce initiative. Greater Rochester Health Foundation has been one of our longtime supporters of this initiative, and we're grateful to their support. Excellus Blue Cross and Blue Shield Health Equity Grant. We are excited to be a recipient that will be promoting and leading youth peer work as well as adult peer advocacy ambassador work. We're grateful for partnership from Western New York, Office of Mental Health Field Office, the Recast, Reimagine. We are part of the Recast initiative in Western New York and are extremely grateful. We also want to acknowledge our local partner, Monroe County, for partnering with us on our youth peer initiatives, and all of our partners that have partnered with us. Hillside Family is an agency, Starbridge, all of our nonprofits locally that continue to support this work at some capacity. And I would not be able to do what I do without the incredible staff of the BIPOC Peak Project that are out there every day laboring, making sure that we are able to serve the most important individuals as a part of our project, children and families in this region. And we would not be here today without the incredible talented speakers who you will hear from today, from our keynote to our panelists. You will be well informed with information that can help you along the way. So just a few housekeeping. Once the keynote starts, we will cut off the chat unless she gives you other directives. We want to be mindful. We asked you that you put no links into the chat. We want this to be safe, brave space. And we want everyone to be in a position of learning. And we will put our website in the chat where you can follow us and get updated information on our family peer advocacy recruitment. We are recruiting candidates for our family peer advocate cohort in Monroe County as well as Erie County. We want parents to be out there and caregivers. We know that peer model is an evidence-based model that works. It is proven. We also want to be engage our fathers in this work as peer advocates. We know our statistics, particularly in upstate New York. We don't have, it's disheartening. And that's one of the reasons we started the initiative, is to get more peer advocates credentialed of color. So we need you, not just this day, this month, but we need you to spread the word. Again, we will play the slideshow at the end. The QR codes are on our website. email us for more information. If you are interested and know someone that's interested in Monroe County or Western New York of becoming a youth or family peer advocate, reach out to us. Our cohorts will be starting up at the end of February and beginning of March, and we have some opportunities to train and prepare for the workforce, the career profession, family and youth peer advocates. So again, welcome everyone today. I want to talk about our theme for this series of 2025, recognizing the value of individual lived experience. Again, we will offer education, information, and resources from a cultural perspective related to trauma, suicide prevention, substance use, stigma, awareness, healing centered wellness, and self care, peer supports, peer profession, access to care, non traditional services, centering youth voice, and more. Through this theme, we are recognizing the value of individuals with lived experience and expertise. We believe that amplifying and valuing lived experience will advance opportunities to transform practices, communities, systems, as well as enrich and save lives. So, again, we thank you for joining us this morning. I'm excited, and hopefully, if time permits, we will allow you to ask our keynote or speakers questions through the questions and answers tool. I want to give a disclaimer. This is not clinical or medical advice. We are providing an education and resource format here today. Please feel free if you have a question. If we have time, we will open it up and let you know that questions will be filtered through the Q&A tool on the Facebook, on the Zoom tool. That will be the only opportunity to ask questions if you are actually in the Zoom room and using the Q&A tool. I am ready if you are ready to bring up our keynote, who is very dear to me. I am not going to read her entire bio, but I want to make reference that the speakers' bios are featured and will be featured on our website. All of our speakers come with a wide range of expertise and experience, but we're not able to share their full bios today. Pascale Jean-Noel is the Director of Training for the ACT Institute at the Center for Evidence-Based Practices, working with the New York State Office of Mental Health. She has designed and coordinated and facilitated extensive training curriculum and planning, cultural humility awareness, engaging, working with mandated clients, the ACT team on daily principles based on person-centered recovery principles. She received her bachelor's degree and master's degree from Adelphi University School of Social Work in Garden City, New York. She holds a clinical license of social work and has over 20 years of experience in social service setting. She is well seasoned across many systems, including the substance use. She presents yearly at multiple conferences nationally and statewide. Her topics include positionality through leadership and service delivery, person-centered and supervision strategies, improve mental health outcomes in the Black community, supervision in a data-driven environment, and so much more. And I can tell you, for me, she is a mentor. She's also a consultant trainer that speaks authentically and boldly about Black women in leadership. And I am so excited that she said yes and is our opening keynote. Pascale Jean-Noel.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you. And thank you for trusting me to enter your spaces always. I appreciate you seeing my light and receiving it as well. Thank you all for signing on today, for joining in the space. It is kind of weird to me. I just want to say I'm just talking into a screen. I like to see people, but I'm going to get over it. I'm going to get over it. I'm just going to talk and deliver what I came to deliver. So, welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome into the space. Happy Saturday. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone feels good. And if not, by the time you leave here, that you will feel inspired, you will feel fed as much as possible. So I just want to start off with talking a little bit about me, a little bit more. Sara, she read my bio. You know, that bio is a presentation for all, right? It is the script that we put in front of our professional spaces or just to represent us as much as possible. Talk about who we are. It really doesn't talk about who we are. It talks about who we are in the spaces that we enter. But let me talk to you a little bit about who I am. This picture here is a picture of my mother. I didn't realize how much I look like her with the low haircut. That smile, my mother always had this infectious smile that she carried with her, no matter where she was at. But you never knew the pain that she was experiencing behind that smile. She just kept that facade in order for her to function. And how much of this sounds very relevant to us in our community? We're taught to keep a straight face always. Well, my mother's pain took her life silently and violently through cancer. When I was 19 years old, I lost my mom. And that's where life actually began for me differently. And just to step back, my parents, both of my parents were married. I grew up in a household with both parents being there. My parents migrated or immigrated from Haiti. So I am a child of Haitian parents, of Haitian DNA. I just want to put that out there. So any Haitians in the room, sac à fête. Usually we say sac passé, but today I'm gonna say sac à fête. Yeah, there's something about the resilience that we hold. There's something about our presence that we hold, and our history, right? We still got to get it together though. We got a lot of work to do, but I'm gonna leave that alone. This is not what this topic is about. But it does show you how there's discord in our community, despite the strength that we come from, and despite the challenges that we're impacted by. Let's go back to my mom. My mom died when I was 19 years old. 19 years old was when I was in my first year of college. That hit me. That hit me. Watching my parents go through their relationship and learning what relationship was about, what family was about, what love was about through my parents, and how I saw my father treat my mother and my mother treat my father, and how I saw they related to one another. And let me take a step back. I am the oldest sister. It's me and my brother. We are a year apart. So you know that's a trait too that speaks to my personality. I'm a little bossy. I'm a leader. My brother, I have to trail him behind all the time. So I was the one that was always standing up front, trying to advocate and do everything around us and for us as much as possible. He fought me. He didn't like a lot of things, but listen, I had his best interest in heart. That's what older siblings do. And so, anyway, growing up and watching my parents and watching my mom and the sadness that she carried, but could never have the voice to speak it because of the fear of what it would do and what it would bring. Also worried about what I gotta do right for you kids. I shouldn't show you what's going on. I have to. There's certain things I have to protect you from, so that you don't. It doesn't infiltrate you. So it doesn't. What's the word? So that you don't experience the negatives of it. Guess what, Ma? Was watching. I saw it. But because you weren't ready to talk about it, I couldn't talk about it with you so that I could better understand what you were going through. And maybe I could have advocated for you in the process, but she wasn't ready. She used to always say to me, girl, your spirit, your mouth is going to get you killed. And I said, Mom, trust me, they're not going to kill me, but I'm going to make sure that I stand up for my rights and defend myself, especially when I'm not being treated fairly. And Ma, if you feel like you're not happy, say it and say what doesn't make you happy and demand for it to happen for your happiness. We got to own it. You got to own it. So my mom, oh, child. Okay, eventually my mom's pain turned into a cancer that eventually killed her. And I remember in this picture here, these were one of her last days, the year prior to her dying. And sitting in this picture here, she's smiling, but she was so worried. I'm going to leave my kids behind. What's going to happen when I leave my kids behind? I won't be here to protect them anymore. I won't be able to guide them anymore. And I could only imagine the pain of a mother. And I pray that I never have to go through that in this early stages of my kids' life, where you are battling with, I am going to leave them here. So in the process, well, what do I armor them with when I leave them here? So my mom didn't get a chance to, because she didn't felt armored. She felt unarmored. She felt that she didn't have no tools. She just knew as much as possible as whatever she was taught by her mother and how to survive. So that's how we carry through our stuff, right? My mother did the best that she knew how. I tell you, at 19, listen to that age. From 19 on, I just learned how to survive and keep moving in spite of whatever comes before me. Boy, you know that Celie and the color purple? And when she made that statement, all my life I had to fight. I felt like all my life I had to fight what I was fighting. I just knew that there were things in front of me that just kept blocking me. While my mother passed, my father still stayed, making sure that he has to uphold this household. And let me give you some characteristics of my dad: strong family values. My father, we all were baptized in the Episcopalian religion. And in addition to that, my father was a Mason. So need I say more? There were some strict values there that my father upheld in the household to make sure that we were right. So he did the best he could, given what he had and given the tools that he was given by his parents and parents' parents. My father did the best that he could, given what he had. But that also created an environment for me as well. Here I am, that firstborn child. My spirit is fire. My mother been telling me since I was a child, girl, keep your mouth shut. But that was to keep the peace for her. Because if he couldn't control me, he went to her to come after me. So imagine the turmoil. And now here she is stuck with, I'm leaving her with him. And I kept saying, Ma, don't worry, we're going to be all right. I'm his child. I'm a product of him. I'll be okay. And so it left me and him and my brother after 19. I survived the best way that I knew how, but it was always a battle. And then it wasn't until I got married, created my own family, and it wasn't until several years into my marriage that I was at a crossroads, and there was turmoil in my marriage, but I realized I carried a lot of this stuff with me, and I just didn't know, from my husband's generational trauma to mine. I just didn't understand. There was stuff that I was navigating throughout these years, and it was always a battle after a battle. But why? I only wanted to walk right. I only wanted to do right. I only wanted to do good. I only wanted to live, and I was determined to do so. And when we got to this crossroads, and that was less than 5 years ago. Now, mind you, got married young so that I can get out the house and run from all of this. And maybe I can create my own. And then realize that when I moved into creating my own, those ancestral scars with me. I carried my mother's pain with me. And I didn't realize I was carrying my grandmother's pain too. Both grandmothers on both sides. So it wasn't till I became what's the word that I'm looking at? I wasn't till that crossroads. It wasn't till those challenges in the marriage that now I had to face, like, what's going on? There's certain things that I need to make sure that I find out, well, where is this from? And instead of finding a regular counselor therapist, I seeked a spiritual therapist, a spiritual guide. I don't even remember what her role was called, but she was someone that did spiritual work. So in my work with her, one of the first things she said to me, it is not your issue is not what's happening in your marriage. It's what's happening in your generational bloodline. You have some ancestral stuff that you're carrying. And until you face that and release that and break that, there are certain patterns that you will continue to move with. Whoa. So it's not in my relationship that I focused on. It really is in my parents. Wow. And I didn't realize that till my late 40s. All right, fast forward, I started doing the spiritual work. And I decided, whoa, I've always known that there's certain patterns I didn't like and that I wasn't going to keep. But at the same time, how would I be able to do it? What tools did I have to figure it out? Well, she gave me some tools and some things, and then she disappeared. She gave me what was needed at the time when I needed it. But one thing I also understood is that I am ready to break this cycle because I got daughters and I don't want them to continue to carry my grandmother's pain to my mother's pain and then my pain. I need to stay right here and fix it. Needless to say, I am living with both my father and also in my marriage. So now I was left to face both of the things that were challenging me at the time, that were evoking certain things within me. So it led me to tap into my spirituality. Now, I grew up again in religion, a straight religion. I grew up with a father that was Mason, a Mason as well. So think about it. There's certain constraints that were put up before me. I had to act accordingly. I had to abide by a role as a woman. I'm his first child. I'm the daughter. But yet he couldn't see my powers in me. He worked very hard to silence them, just like my mother did, but my mother did for her protection. And he silenced me because of his fear. So I had protection, and both of them were fear driven. How much of us navigate this world and are blocked by being our best authentic selves because we are fearful of the outcome? And it's not what the world is going to do to us, it's our own home environment, it's our own home and community that will challenge us because we are challenging the status quo within our community. And how many times have I said stuff folk are not ready to hear? But my spirit leads me to say it because it needs to be said. Enough is enough. How many of us are brave enough to tap into that? And when I started looking into my spirituality and understanding the difference between what I was told, there were certain things, right? As you think about it, makes sense. Spirituality versus religion. Religion creates structure, right? That if you don't act accordingly, that there are consequences and there's judgment that goes behind it. There's the fear and the restriction. Understood that. Is that not also from slavery years? And if you interrupted, that would cause problems for the rest of everyone. And everyone just wanted to live until the next day. But then spirituality is based on love and freedom, loving thyself, owning thyself, which sets you free. That level of authenticity, nobody could take that away from you. I'd rather get in trouble for being my authentic self than being something else. Religion feels like a drop in the ocean versus spirituality feels like the entire ocean in a single drop, period. Religion is based on others' experience, right? It's a set of norms that are put together that we should all abide by, but spirituality is based on your personal experience. So my experiences in life taught me to tap into my spirituality the best way I knew how. It is a work in progress, y'all. Then as I was tapping into my spirituality, you're also looking at the guidance of folks around you and how they've tapped into yours, including my parents, including my community, and realizing as I was tapping into my spirituality, how there were certain things that would come to me that would messages that I needed to hear, right? Through different angels, through different spirits, through different energy, whatever we want to call it. And then here's some parts as well, too, as you're defining your spirituality. And just for thought. It doesn't have to be for everyone, but whoever it is for, may you receive. When we're looking at the spiritual ego, right? As we are developing, we tend to feel like sometimes we're more advanced than others. Hey, some of us do have experience that we can lend on others, but everyone is the expert in theirs, and until they own it, they will become a spiritual narcissist, right? Where you really feel like your beliefs and practices are better, right, for the community. It's ego driven. It's how people respond. So we get greedy once we own and understand who we are, and we can become deviant around it. for the sake of validation and for our egos to be fed. But then again, that's talking about self. But then what is the damage that you're doing to others? And then that group like mentality. Some of us feel like we need a sense of community, and all of us need a sense of community. But do we all have to think the same way? No. But do we have to have a common core of value of love? Right? Yeah. To what extent? I have to love myself first and know what that means in order for me to pour into others. It's okay to have community around it, but be mindful of the community that you keep. And then how are we navigating it through our Messiah complex, right? Where we have the need to save others and responsible for others. But then when I looked at my parents and my mom and my grandmothers, I recognized that both grandmothers on both sides were in similar relationships with their partners, and both decided, I'm not doing this no more. I'm gone. Whereas my mother carried it and stayed in it, and her pain became her cancer, and it killed her while she was in it. She did not know the best way possible to safely advocate for herself, to save herself in ways that she needed to be saved. So, what did I do now? I took on that Messiah complex for my mom. My mom couldn't fight her battles, so I'm fighting it for her. And that's why the energy of always being in war followed behind me in my marriage as well, in my relationships as well. And I had to realize that I was not the one to save my mother. My mother's journey was her journey, but her experience and her journey showed me that it was important to save myself for the sake of my daughters and my daughters' daughters, of living a better life as much as possible, where they don't have to feel burdened by having to save themselves or save others, right? Or save their partners, or and losing themselves in the process. And then we have spiritual bypassing. Some of us, right? You know what? God gonna take care of it. I'm just gonna disassociate and just navigate as much as I can. You know, um, and that's an avoidance. We still got to go back to core. Until you break down and go back to your core self, you will always be disrupted and in turmoil. And until I had to face, well, what was I trying to do? What was my spirit taking charge for that it no longer had to take charge for? And again, I walked around not understanding why people responded to me the way that they did as I was disrupting the trauma and the generational curses and patterns that were meant to permeate and continue. So I would realize how people will respond. And when your spirit irritates their demons, folks will come for you. We call it spiritual warfare in the spiritual world, right? To learn not to get distracted and to stay focused on owning myself. So, what I came up with and understood, I saw this quote from a lady on Instagram. Her name is Layla Dalia. I'm butchering her name, but she said it's not personal, it's vibrational. And until I learned that, I kept walking in spiritual alignment. It's not personal how folks respond when you're walking in your authentic self and understand your purpose, your role, and your inner being. It is vibrational. Deliver and keep it moving. I understood that when I faced what I faced within my home that I needed to face. Understood that, didn't let that distract me, because every part of it was to block me and stop me because of their fear, their insecurities. But instead, I rose above that as much as possible and have grace for them. I understand the meaning behind their behavior, but let me put you aside so I could keep moving. Just like we're looking at this world right now, DI, everything is jumping out. It's a smoke screen. Stay focused. Sometimes there are things that happen to shake us up, to tell us, wake up, we got too comfortable. It's time to keep moving forward and strategize. And then when you look at, we've been through a lot. I've experienced racial trauma. We all have experienced racial trauma in some way or another. Even with my parents coming from Haiti, they've experienced some form of racial trauma, even within their own land. And then fast forward, you bring it to America, you bring it to the structures here. It's written in the DNA. And folks remember Antoinette Bailey? She is someone who was in academia, a Black female, experiencing the racial trauma, and the impacts of her racial trauma led her to death, taking her life. Let's make space for this. As much as we say we're picking up our bootstraps and walking through and making sure we're going to do what we have to do, let's be mindful. There are lasting effects, the anxiety that comes about it, the PTSD, the self destructive behaviors, the social withdrawal, the recurring nightmares, the depression, the low self esteem, the upsetting thoughts, the strong emotional physical responses, the hypervigilance, the chronic stress, the avoidance, the reoccurring nightmares, all of that happening from generation to generation. It leaves an impact. It is heavy for a lot of us. And even when you get out of it, you have to learn that you are no longer in that cycle anymore, and to breathe and to live. I had to learn that. So not only was I dealing with the generational trauma of my family, I was also in spaces, predominantly white spaces, where I had to also combat and deal with the racial trauma and the lasting effects that it had on my mind and my body. I have to now pay attention to. This particular Black woman, it was heavy for her. Recognize how heavy these loads are. Recognize your friends, your coworkers when they're coming to you and sharing certain stories. Let's make room and space for each other. Not everyone has the same capacity, and let's have grace with each other and really hold each other to honing in their authentic self and their authentic being. Check on your strong friends. It is so necessary. That one that always seems like they got it together, that one that smiles the most in social settings, that's probably the saddest one in the room. Pay attention. That strong friend that always has the answers for everyone, that's always there and supportive, are you there for them? That family member that's always holding things down, that's always a strong one, check on them too and ask them how they're doing. Reverse the role every once in a while. And when you ask them how they're doing, make space and time to hear it, y'all. Pay attention. They're giving you messages here and there. Let's really start to focus on each other. We are each other's medicine. Let's own that. Let's navigate that as much as possible. And for us that we are in community, a lot of times we think that we have to compete. There's no space for everyone else. It only has to be me. When you get to where you're going, when you get to that seat at the table, hold each other up. When you get that level and you're reaching to that vibrational level, pull each other up. Walk in alignment and you receive alignment. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, we got to leave some people behind. Harriet, I'm going to be nice, y'all. You know what Harriet did to folks that was impacting freedom? Sometimes you got to leave people behind. In some spaces, I'll say, I'm not going to argue with anyone Harriet would have shot, but it's okay. It's okay. Every one of us have a role in how we navigate this. Own which one you are. It is not a competition. Nobody has your assignment. Your assignment was meant for you. Healing also is something that we have to own to, because it makes you realize that you should be afraid of losing yourself by trying to please others. That's what your fear should be. And that's what I learned. I will not go down for something that doesn't belong to me. I'll go down with you for something that does. And then also one thing that I really, really, really am paying attention to, especially during this challenge, especially during this healing process, which ancestor am I in my bloodline? Which ancestor are you in yours? What does that look like for you? And I also understand I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Where are you in this journey? I know I'm walking by faith and alignment. I know who I am and where I belong. I challenge you to enter that space and find it for yourself. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, Pascale. Oh my gosh. I'm sitting here holding back the tears, but yet so much that you've given us, so much of yourself, so much of your growth in this space of healing. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for sharing with us today. I can't tell you, I'm taking notes here and just holding back. Um, Thank you. And I trust that the words that you shared today will help someone bring a level of awareness of how important it is for us to go back, go deep to find out what that root is within. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to take a moment. I tell you, it's hard here to compose myself. And I know you're giving her a hand out there, a pause. So, again, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Pascale. We're going to open up. If there's one person, you got to go through the chat, you got to go through the QR question and answer tool. If there is a question for Pascale, she hit on every aspect of our topic as we talk about trauma, as we talk about generational, as we talk about healing and community. While we're waiting to see if anyone has a question, I have a question, Pascale. As we think about healing, as we think about women of color who are often leading, moms, parents, aunties, cousins, sisters, how do we continue to work on our own healing when we are being hit every day with something? Whether it's at work, at home, something in our past creeps up, our children, or we're hit every day in everyday life, society. And as we are bracing ourselves for what's to come for us as leaders and men and women of color walking in this space of equity, how do we navigate these spaces and heal when we're being often attacked on a daily basis?
Well, I would say one of the ways that I navigated was making time for myself away from everyone, whether that's working out, whether that's going on my personal walks every day. And what I found that once I started on those personal walks, there are so many things that my mind is constantly thinking, right? So as I'm walking, there's so many answers and things, affirmations that are coming to me. And realize how healing and therapeutic that was just to listen to my own thoughts in a space. Allowing yourself to hear your thoughts. I promise you, you'll be able to answer them. So have making space and time for you. Another thing, if you can travel to a different environment for a few days. Go by the water, go by the ocean, go by the sea and cleanse yourself. It's just that
Wow.
basic.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Absolutely. Taking space for yourself. We have one question in the chat, and then we're going to transition to your panel. When do you know you um, have healed? I think that's what it should be, or there is progress.
When things no longer hurt you the same. Think of a wound. When you first get cut, you got to nurse it, right? So there's no infection. And if there is, you got to treat that too. But it's painful. You could take a pill to numb it, but when the numbing goes away, right, you're still feeling that pain. That means that it's healing. Then it starts scratching, right? You start feeling a little bit better, a little bit easier. You know that there's something that's working. Healing is painful. When it starts to feel painful, know that you are in that process. And when you sit in it as much as your capacity can give you, you'll be surprised how you make it through. You'll give yourself space to start to feel that itch when it starts healing. And then eventually it just leaves a scar. You can pay attention to it, but you don't. It's up to you. Sitting in that pain. And when you know you're healing, it hurts. It hurts like heck, but you sit through it until you no longer feel the same way for the same reasons again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pascale. And again, we thank you for pouring into us. And we hope for some and many that may be in this space or watching our stream that they will understand and take the steps necessary and the tools that you have given them. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to transition to our panel. Amazing, amazing keynote. Thank you for kicking us off. We are going to ask our panelists, they are welcome to put on their camera at this time. We're going to segue into the panel. They will be able to unmute themselves. And we are going to jump right in. We are going to jump right in with a very, very distinguished panel that I am going to ask them a series of questions, but I'm going to ask them to give us just a short, brief opening statement regarding a question that I sent to them, and just in general, our opening question for all of the panelists. Healing. And when we talk about mental health in the Black community, healing and wellness often looks different for diverse populations and cultures. What can we do to increase opportunities to address mental health and trauma in the Black community? I am going to start up in my corner with the Reverend Dr. Dan Butler. In that opening question, just again, a few minutes, just a quick opening statement. What can we do about mental health and trauma in the Black community?
Well, the one thing, thank you, Sarah. Just want to say for being here. Pascale got me on a thousand right now. My God. But I just want to say that what we have to do is what you're doing today. We have to get the word out. And what we have to do is be able to talk about it without the stigma and let people know that I believe in something called psychological safety and what that really means, and understanding something as well that I've gotten from, I got a note right here, Dr. Rita Walker, that talks about psychological fortitude, getting the word out, speaking about that, understanding the real trauma that we have in our urban communities, especially since we're here in Rochester talking about the continued gun violence, for an example, understand how people are impacted, and to have a no judgment free zone, being able to understand that we're here to meet a need and that you can be open to discuss the need that you're looking to see to be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Dan. And as you were talking and sharing some terms and talking, one of the things that I recognize when we talk about, and again, not stereotyping or putting labels on any groups, but when we think about certain populations and demographics, we often talk about trauma, that word trauma. What does that word trauma mean to little Junebug down the street? So we often use terms and say things when trauma may be someone's everyday way of life, or what they know is normal. They have normalized it, what we know as trauma. So one of the things that I do know, which I'm sure we'll hear from you, is we got to have these conversations in layman's terms, and have these conversations and meet people where they really are, and not try to make them fit into these evidence-based models that don't make no sense to them. So we're going to segue on and allow Chandra to give an opening statement. Chandra Redfern.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for this opportunity to participate. So, when I think about what we need to do, like there's so many things that come to mind. But there's two that stand out for me. One is really practicing person-centered trauma-informed care and practices, right? And that can be done in any type of environment, because the thing about it is that being trauma-informed helps us to recognize the prevalence of trauma, like you just said. Like, first of all, some people don't even know they're dealing with trauma. So we have to look at it as it relates to the Black community. What is traumatic for one group of people may not be traumatic for the other group of people, right? Like you said. So, but the second thing is, I believe is very important, is raising awareness around the intersection of race and mental health. Because we have this myth of resilience, right, in our community. And in order to get people to talk more about their struggles, we have to dispel that myth, right? Yes, we have overcame, I like to say overcame some things, but I try not to use resiliency so much because people wear that as a badge of honor, right? And so I'm not going to tell you there's something going on with me if I think I'm going to lose something, right? That resilience by telling you that. And so we need to help teach people and address the impact of systemic racism, police violence, economic inequality, disparities of healthcare. Like all these things contribute to the Black experience with mental health and the struggle. And so I believe that we need to bring those things to the forefront more versus we tend to talk about them as, oh, well, they're resilient because they've dealt with this, and this community has dealt with this 10th tragedy or this 20th shooting. No, we don't want to be resilient in that way, right? But we need to talk about like racism as it relates to Black people and how it is affecting our mental health. So that's one thing I would say that we need to look at as an opportunity.
Thank you so much. You gave us so many points and nuggets to walk away with in this space. And I love, I often see in the grants, in the training, resilience, resilience, resilience. But you definitely gave us some food for thought as we often are trained on promoting resilience and really looking at it from a different lens. So thank you for that. Curtis Jones, would you give us an opening remarks regarding what can we do? What should we be doing?
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm like Dan, I'm on fire from Pascale's keynote, taking notes, and old folks say got running in my feet again. So I'm ready to move. I think one of the things I'll say is that we need to let our community know that it's okay not to be okay. Right? We talk about resilience. We talk about the perception of what resilience means. The super strong Black woman and the super strong and leader Black male personas. And the truth of the matter is that we are hurting. It's okay not to be okay as an individual when something that is bad happens. I think to your point previously, Sarah, that we have normalized trauma in our Black communities. We have normalized gunfire. We have the community, watch this, not just in the Black community, but the majority community, for lack of a better word phrase in this moment, has normalized it to where certain shootings and gunfire doesn't even make the news anymore because it's become so normal. We have to be courageous enough to say it's not okay that these things are happening. We have to be intentional about finding not just solutions because that can become punitive, but finding root causes that will eliminate the external behavior or what we're seeing act out in our community. So it's okay not to be okay. And we have to provide safe spaces for people to articulate their inability to navigate this because this is not normal. It is not normal for young people to die the way they're dying. And for people who are struggling to be seen, you're stronger, so I don't have to give you medicine, or I can treat you differently medically. I can treat you different in mental health fields because your folks or your background makes you stronger. That's not okay.
Wow, thank you for that. So much to unpack too regarding normalizing it. When kids are walking, to school in the morning and seeing drug paraphernalia, on the path to school, normalizing, like normalizing. So thank you. Dr. Andre Stokes.
Good morning. First and foremost, thank you very much, Sarah, for having me here. It's good to see everybody. It's good to be here. One of the more important things that I can think of is the aspect of strength and what the word strength really means when we're thinking about the Black community. So a lot of times when we think about strength, we think of resiliency, we think of being able to hold things in and persevere and kind of walk through the fire. However, strength has other meanings to it and can be seen differently. So in particular, strength can mean being open. Strong as in being open enough to speak about some of the challenges that you've gone through, some of the challenges that you've experienced or that you may see coming in the forefront, and being strong enough to be vulnerable. So vulnerability and strength kind of go hand in hand, although they're seen as different. So being strong enough to be vulnerable and allowing ourselves to be open to new avenues of healing. So if we're not able to speak about some of our vulnerabilities in certain spaces, then we disqualify ourselves from receiving information regarding how we can kind of have different types of conversations to allow us to heal and be aware of different types of resources that can allow us to progress in other spaces to kind of fight our trauma just in a different way.
Wow, thank you for that. So much work to be done. Mr. Johnson, I say Mr. Johnson because I tear up your first name all the time, but I'm not going to do it. You're going to tell me today, and I'm going to get it right. So, Mr.
Yeah,
Johnson.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, similar, just want to say thank you for having me on. It's pronounced Antoine, Antoine Johnson, and I'm glad to be here. In regards to the question, my space is like that fatherhood, and young adult male space. And I think that, one of the things that we can begin doing more as a community, as a collective, is helping dads and even young men see themselves in a new light as it relates to, right, our communities, right? Being able to, you mentioned the recast or reimagine project early on, but being able to reimagine their stories versus what their past has been like, right? So whether we're talking about folks who have been, born into different degrees of trauma and so forth, how can we help them reimagine a different life for themselves and their families so that they're able to cast a different kind of vision and so forth. So I don't want to get too far off track with your question, but I think that we can help our dads, our folks in the community, just begin to see a different way of life.
Thank you so much. And that is so important, especially in their environment and their space when they only see one way, exposing them to a different light and way of life. So thank you for those opening comments on our theme and topic. We are going to dive right in. I'm going to segue back up to Dan. And again, I think all of our panelists know their time frame, and I recognize that we got like four preachers up here today too. Okay, we got four preachers on the panel today. So preachers, I'm gonna just leave it right there in this space, in this protocol space. All right, Dan Butler is a consultant for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yes, I'm going to still say DEI at CCSI, where he leads projects, develops relationships with organizations across systems. Dan is also a pastor and well-versed in behavioral health. So your first question, Dan, faith leaders are often influential, credible messengers and leaders in our community. How can we engage faith leaders to be ambassadors in this space to not only address their mental health, but to promote mental health wellness from community lens?
Well, for me, one thing we have to even move beyond ambassadors, become an accomplice, because an accomplice means I got skin in the game. So what does that mean? That means that I'm going to get some training. I'm not going to look at everything as it's a devil, because some things the Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. So we could be human having a spiritual experience. So what we have to do is get trained, come to these events such as this, to where we can learn more and to expand our knowledge base, take a panoramic view of our communities, because it's so important, because so many of our people are hurting, especially in the climate that we're in today, the psychological warfare that is being unleashed. We must be able, as faith leaders, to understand the climate that we are in. And so for me, we have to also know what are the community leaders in our community. How can we partner with other mental health providers. It's so important to understand where the limits of our spirituality stops. To understand for myself, I have a little statement I say, Sarah, is that I know just enough to be above dangerous. You notice I said above dangerous. And understand that, as we heard Chandra talked about, the intersections of race and trauma, all of the things that we are dealing with today, we have to begin to equip ourselves and to understand to be effective. We have to know our subject matter, understand what collaboration is. I think we're also in a time where we're going to have to pull down these silos and be able to be more effective in our community. Again, I'm going to conclude with this. We must begin to educate ourselves. Seminary is great. Have my degrees. All that is nice. But we have to be able to understand the need to understand the concept of mental health, understanding the partners in our community, so that we can truly do, as the Lord said in Luke 4:18, two pieces here: to heal the brokenhearted, to set at liberty those that are bruised. Beginning to understand we must have an integrated approach as we address this phenomenon in our community.
Wow, thank you for that, Dan. So much to unpack, but all prevalent and relevant. Thank you. Chandra Redfern, a dear friend of mine's, CEO, Chief Executive Officer at Buffalo Federation of Neighborhood Centers, a growing trusted community partner and nonprofit in Western New York. Wide range of experience across systems, over 20 years at the organization, and so much more. She's also a pastor and has been very active on the New York State Suicide Prevention Task Force. So, welcome. And your first question: as a CEO of a trusted neighborhood based organization and faith leader, what opportunities do you see for the Black community to address suicide prevention?
Thank you for that question, Sarah. So, there are three opportunities that I pulled out for this because I want to be mindful of my time, you know. So one I think is very important and we have used a lot, probably because I am a faith leader, is leveraging faith communities. Faith communities have a very unique position to support individuals in ways that we as mental health providers, community providers cannot. And so our communities of faith can provide safe spaces, but they can also integrate the things that Pastor Dan talked about, they learn into their spiritual formation, the spiritual life. And I think that is so important when we're talking about addressing suicide prevention, because suicide outside of mental health tends to be a pretty taboo topic, especially in communities of faith. So we really have to leverage those partnerships, working more together versus in opposition, right? I like to say we're not arguing theology, we're arguing about lives, right? And so all lives are important, and that's what we need to be addressing, right? That people are not feeling like they need to take their lives because they just can't take it. The other thing I think is very important is youth empowerment and education. Our youth are really struggling. So we know that the suicide rate, particularly for Black youth, has increased more than any other racial group, right, over the past several years. So this tells us that our youth are crying out for help. And again, I've heard all the panelists when we started out with our question talk about saying it's okay to not be okay, education. And if we don't start early enough on, our youth will develop those same habits that many of us were raised with, right? So we have to be able to change the narrative, educate them, empower them, which leads me to my next point, is that we need to be building peer support networks. So when we can empower Black and African American individuals, right, to create these peer networks, it doesn't put you on an island so much. So when we talk about suicide prevention, it's that thing. I have done workshops where, there'll be one person that's brave enough to say something. And then there's 5 other people that are like, you too? Yeah, that happened to me. I have a cousin and I have this person. I've had pastors that talk about, yeah, because, somebody in my church came to me with this. And so those peer support networks are So important. Yes, we need clinicians, we need our community providers, we need all those other things, but peer support really, really does work. And so we have to look at, because I know it's often not funded, and that's a whole nother conversation, but we have to look at how do we create these arenas where people can come together to support each other? How can we normalize that you really have a village at the end of the day, right? And so who is that village, and people understanding that I don't have to have this type of torment in my mind, in my life, but that there's somebody else and there's a place where I belong. So those are the 3 points that I would say that would help us in addressing suicide prevention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And hopefully, you will have an opportunity to put something in the chat, your website, and all the amazing work that you're doing with moms, as well as the clergy series that you offered. So we also want to make sure that we are sharing trusted resources that are emerging practices in the Black community. Curtis, Pastor Curtis, I'm going to segue over to my dear friend from Erie, Pennsylvania. So excited to partner with you. Curtis has an array of experience as a sought out speaker, was a multi-term city council leader in Erie, now the government community relations leader at the chamber, and also worked for many years in behavioral health in residential settings and community-based settings with youth impacted by mental health and developmental disabilities. So excited to have you here with us, Curtis. As we heard from Chandra, the suicide rates among Black youth, particularly age 10 to 19, has increased by 60%, faster than any other populations. And this was cited by a number of different academic and medical groups a few years, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, excuse me. What can we do from a system and a community-based level to prioritize prevention and education, particularly around a topic that we don't talk about? We know often when someone dies by suicide that most families won't say anything, or they die in their sleep. That's what we often hear. There's a level of shame and blame that unless you've been there, no one can ever imagine. What can we do from a community and a system level?
Again, thank you for that question. I think it's a paramount question for us to really answer. Um, from a systems change, we use the term systems change, systems transformation. If I could add or bring in another thought, we need some system evolution. We need an evolution or an evolving of our systems, because you can change from good to bad and from bad to worse. You can transform from not so good to even worse than that. But we also want to, for me, the idea of evolution means we're expanding into the better form of, a more enhanced or developed form of. And so I think for me, recognizing, we have to recognize where we are in the community. We have to recognize then where we want to be in the community around this topic and around this issue, and then put things in place and find out what are the gaps and what are the voids in our community that are keeping us from where we want to be. Some of that has to do with just being honest about our own fears and feelings and our own experience around mental health and suicidal ideation. I will say in this moment, as a 17-year-old young man, in that age group that you mentioned, 10 to 19, I remember riding my bike, being stressed and frustrated, and a bus was coming down the street in the opposite direction. In my mind, something dropped in my mind and said, all you got to do is roll your bike to the right and it'll all be over. Thank God I didn't. Part of that was because I started thinking about my mother and my siblings. I'm the oldest of 14 children. I started to realize, wait a minute, I do have someone that I could talk to, even if I'm afraid to talk to them. So systems evolution has to happen from and I'll hit my point, so I don't want to get the virtual quote pull, is we need to recognize it again that it's okay not to be okay. I think from a clinical perspective and a system perspective, we have many opportunities available. We have clinicians in schools, we have clinicians in mental health programs in our communities. We don't have enough that are staffed by Black men and women because there's a comfort level, right? A part of this evolution is to increase the level of comfort to share that you're going through what you're going through. So I think it's not just systems, but we need to be systematic in our evolution to get to where we want to be. So understanding that the system is in place, we need to enhance it, we need to evolve it, and then we need to let people know not just that you have access, but we need to combat the issue of perceived non-access. You have a right to tap into these resources. You have a right to tap into these opportunities for your own healing and your own development and your own growth. So from a clinical side, from a system side, we need to take away, grant more access, and then alleviate the issue of perceived non-access. I think there's a point about policy too that I want to throw in as a former legislator and working in government affairs, is that we need to get our legislators at the city, county, state, and federal level to understand that this is a problem that can have some help and support from a policy-based perspective. Someone mentioned about funding. Policy enhancement can help open opportunities for funding. They can open opportunities for organizations that are doing this work, that can provide spaces that are more comfortable and more appropriate for those who need to be in them, who historically have felt that they did not belong or could not access. So those are just a few things that I want to throw out. Not just systems change, but systematic change. And we need to evolve this entire conversation into something that we can all share our input, share our perspective, and be safe to do so.
No, absolutely. And thank you for that. And as you were talking about access, one of the things that came to mind is accountability. We have the same organizations that get all the funding and write all these grants around equity going in the neighborhoods, and they ain't coming in the neighborhoods. And when our folks no show or not comply, it becomes their problem and not the practitioners or the organization. So as we think about policy and systems change, accountability for providers, those in the position of power to do things differently and to allow the community to design programs that work for them. But yes. All right, Dr. Stokes, we're going to segue over to Dr. Andre Stokes, another colleague of mine with an array of experience, a CASAC, substance abuse counselor, author, and now new director of community programs for Hillside family of agencies that have spent many years working across the behavioral health system. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Talk about, I want to, because over the last few days, with some dynamics in my family going on, I've been surrounded by smoke, by weed. Okay, I'm just gonna say by weed. And can you talk about the legalization of marijuana? Because in many communities, it's like smoking cigarettes. Let's be honest. And with the legalization of marijuana, it changed dynamics a little bit. So can you talk briefly in your time frame regarding the legalization of marijuana, pros and cons?
Absolutely. It's an excellent talking point, and I'm glad this is a part of our discussion. So, as we know, Black communities have kind of established and maintained a particular set of cultural procedures and aspects in the way that it operates. So, of course, accompanying a portion of those cultural procedures is a use of marijuana, and oftentimes used for the purpose of coping with stress and emotional regulation. So, the statistics have shown that members of the Black community are more likely to use marijuana for stress and emotional regulation at higher rates compared to other race groups, right? So some of those are related to financial vulnerability, systemic racism, but most likely due to the desire to mitigate some of those mental health symptoms and challenges that we face as a whole. So those mental health challenges are oftentimes linked to legal and policy systems that we spoke about a minute ago. So the caveat to that is the statistics do report that Black folks are 4 times more likely than other race groups to be arrested for those marijuana possessions and that, despite the comparable usage rates. So 10 states in the United States that their Black people are 5 times more likely to be arrested for the possession of marijuana, which is legalized, right? So after the legalization of marijuana, the overall arrest rates did decrease to a degree. However, those racial disparities still are a key issue for clinical avoidance. So as we know for quite some time that, the overall institutional discrimination has been a big part of the way that we live and the emotional conditions and so forth. And those affect the medical endeavors that we spoke about, other areas of substance abuse, maladaptive behaviors, and again, clinical avoidance due to clinicians being sometimes seen as part of the legal and the policy system. So we have to think about how the legalization of marijuana interacts with that. And research examines the relationship between the exposure and the exposure of the policies and how those can be detrimental to the overall scope of mental health. So, with touching on the history of the mistrust within the Black community, and the concept of the self-healing through what we consider traditional and maybe non-traditional methods, depending on who we're speaking with. We always know that the cultural aspects are the primary implications of some of the behaviors that are within the community. So when we are talking more about the rates compared to other race groups, there's a disconnect. And the disconnect is the word legal, and the legalization being somewhat of a free-for-all to folks who may not understand what legal actually means. And the caveat to that is the legalization is also part of a policy, but a lot of times there's a little bit of a knowledge gap that kind of contributes to not understanding what the legalization means and, kind of having possession and being in possession and then, being enrolled in the prison system and so forth because it's now legal, but legal within certain parameters. So I think that's one of the more important things to think about with the legalization of marijuana. What are the legal parameters and the legal justifications to have it and to use it?
Wow, thank you for that. Because again, I think when, we talk about marijuana, however you call it, what you call it, I know there's a lot of different names that I know and that I don't know. There's so much that we don't know as it relates to the impact on our community. So thank you for that informative.
Thank you.
Antoine, we're going to segue over to you. And I tell you, Antoine, I have the opportunity to get to know him a little bit, but look forward to partnering with him in the upcoming year in Western New York and nationally. He's doing amazing work, and he's a dedicated father. And has, during his tenure as the program manager at the Buffalo Perinatal, he led the fatherhood initiative and developed the fundamental framework. And when I tell you, if you're looking at a national model, they need to come to Western New York and know what you built on. And, I am looking at your quote that choked me up this morning. And I need to read your quote before I give your question. Is you are driven by the quote, you can't conquer what you won't confront. And what Pascale was talking about, what everyone else talked about, you can't conquer what you can't confront. So, your first question, you've led a very, very successful initiative that I know is a national model for fathers and amplifying their voices. How can we improve opportunities? We know how Black males are perceived at every level, how Black males are perceived. But how can we create and improve opportunities for spaces for Black males to discuss and address their own mental health?
Yeah, thank you for that, first of all. But I would be remiss if I didn't give credit to Mr. or Pastor Reggie Cox, who I had an opportunity to go through one of his fatherhood programs way back about 8 years ago. And that's one of the things that he shared that was really transformative for me. And in light of that, you all hear some crying in the background with my kids, this fatherhood on in real time. But in any ways, I think one of the things that we can do to answer your question is just be more intentional about providing opportunities for men, fathers to come together. And a lot of times, practitioners, service providers, we don't even need to do a whole lot of work because when we create the space, the guys, the dads, men really begin to do their own inner healing, right? They begin to share stories and they begin to be vulnerable and transparent and all those things that are needed in order to confront and conquer some of the emotions that have held them bound, both intergenerationally and presently in their lives. And so I think it's just being more intentional about creating those kind of spaces. Like last year, our group was a part of doing barbershop talks and retreats or conferences, things like that, which are just really platforms or vehicles to open the door for conversations to be had that really can lead to healing. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you. And just creating, I like what you said, creating the space and allowing them to do the work. So creating those spaces. Thank you so much. Dan, I'm going to segue over to you. And I'm also looking at our time. So I'm going to ask our panelists just to sum up quickly their last question. Dan, can you talk about unspoken family dynamics related to acceptance, engagement, as we think about stigma, shame, guilt, culture, and denial when someone is experiencing symptoms related to mental health? If you can sum that up, Dan.
There we go. I just wanted to say I'm honored to be on this panel. My goodness, I'm just energized for the rest of the weekend. So I'm gonna do this, Sarah. I started out preaching. I got 10 minutes. So I'm gonna use a minute and a half. That all right? So one thing is that we carry this in our culture, we got to carry strength and weakness together. So what we do is we put too much on our shoulders, and that we have a tendency to be so judgmental that something is broken, we want to hide it. So, but what has happened is something I wrote down that my good brother here, Dr. Stokes, said, clinical avoidance. And I really like that on how we avoid help as if they're showing that we're weak. I think what we have to do from a faith leader standpoint is get the word out. It is all right, as we've heard today, that something is wrong. It is okay to pull down the stigma and the guilt and to really upend this tradition that is really damaging to us in our culture. And so let them know there is help here and that I personally have a therapist. Yes, I'm a pastor. I do all this work, but I have a therapist myself. And I think sometimes what we should do is be willing to share our own lived experience with others that struggle with this and make them comfortable to see help. I have a Black therapist. Find a Black therapist. Find someone that looks like you. Being able to talk with them and to begin to pull down, because shame will maim you and you will not move forward to the help that you need as a family. You must move forward. And that I think, again, my job as a faith leader is to help them understand that it's okay to have and to get help and quit trying to be super mom or super dad. Because all you're doing is you're going to burn out, you're going to wear yourself out, and then you're no good for anybody. And you continue the perpetual cycle of generational pain, and it will not stop. But I believe again that once they understand that it's all right to not be all right and to look out and to find some help, and there's enough of us in the community, we open up that we can find other Black therapists and counselors and psychotherapists and psychologists to be able to meet the need, and it's all right. Begin to work on the path to healing.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully, we will have on our website. We know through the Recast project in Western New York that the Black clinicians of color will be putting out a directory. So we will make sure that information is on our website or a link to it. I'm going to segue over quickly to Chandra, your question. We know what happened with the massacre, the horrific massacre in Buffalo over 2 years ago in May. What successful initiatives have you seen address traumatic events experience, and what are some missing opportunities?
Thank you. And I'm just going to say quickly that I'm gonna have to steal that. You can't conquer what you can't confront. You know that'll preach a message. So, um, but you talked about reimagine. I think reimagine. I am the change, which was funded through the Office of Mental Health via the Research Foundation, was very successful in providing avenues for non-traditional mental wellness and also healing for Black and African Americans. And through that project, there were several different initiatives, one of which was our Mommy Matters group, as well as our faith-based initiative in which we hosted workshops for faith leaders. Through our project, we were able to, we call them wellness ambassadors, and those are individuals that are in the faith community that basically were educated and are now the champions and are the trusted sources, and we've seen it be very, very effective. But there was so much in non-traditional healing. They did a lot with music, movement. They did a lot with the arts. They did student mental health internship programs. So there, it was a different approach than go to a counselor. They also did put together a Black mental health team as well. But I really think the success was doing these non-traditional avenues of wellness. And so we have seen it continue through Recast as well. And I did put that in the chat for our portion, but there's so many other partners in that grant. So I really think that out of something so horrific and tragic, that was something that's good that has come out to help our community. One of the things I do think is needed, however, is really addressing the economic impact of what happened and what is going on. I think we often don't look at people's mental and emotional wellness being tied to financial consequences. And when we talk about the Black community, we have to address the economic impact and the challenges, because those actually, for many people, we found, I mean, one of the things in our Mommy Matters group, we do sessions on dealing with financial stress because it's real. And so I think that, some initiatives could have been focused a little bit more on that. But again, I say as a community, it's something that we have to address, knowing that it is an issue.
Wow, thank you for that, Chandra, tying it to economics. Yes, yes, yes. All right, we are going to segue over to Curtis for your last question. If you can sum it up, I know you talked about it a little bit in your other question. When we talk about systems transformation, collective impact, we need it all. We can't just have the clinical. We need the grassroots. We need the community education. We need the policy. We need the faith leaders. Offer 2 strategies for addressing mental health inequities.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel, this phenomenal workshop that you and your group are doing all month and beyond February. I think one of the things that we can do is realize that we are all in the same boat, and we need to start rowing in the same direction. And someone mentioned silos, and I know the term silos has become rather cliche, but yet as cliche as the term is, the strength of their boundaries is still very realistic in our community. And so we have people that are saying and we're fighting for the same thing, but we're doing it in different directions. We have to one amass and see the need that I think we can all agree on, and then begin to say, how do I, in my area, my sphere of influence, my way of operating, whether it's grassroots, whether it's ministry, whether it's economics, whether it's workforce development, whether it's a clinician, whether it's a pastor, faith leader, we're now pushing and rowing in the same direction. I think that is one key. We're not missing anything except a unified approach to getting to where we all desire to be, I think. So the second one is, again, the level of transparency that is needed is going to cause us. I am almost 50 years old. I know I don't look it, but I'm almost 50 years old. And I'm in that John the Baptist almost phase where I'm in between old school and new school, right? And so I can see both sides of the spectrum. We have to realize that there are things that our mothers and fathers, our ancestors gave us, as Pascale mentioned, that were unhealthy. And we can say that those things were unhealthy without disrespecting our elders. And we can say that these young people are experiencing things that we never could have imagined growing up. And we have to let go of the fact that, well, we did it, it worked for us this way. So I think one, rowing in the same direction, two, being transparent, owning where we are as a community, and generationally seeing the differences, but yet finding the uniform or the unity of what we need to do for our whole community is extremely important. I'll close with this. As a pastor, we do a lot of faith work, but I don't know how much work we do in our faith. And so I think that faith is important, systems being in place, policy, those things are, to me, working to get those things on paper are important. That's the faith of what we're doing. But the action is to make sure that those who need those systems, those resources, those opportunities are moved to the place. So faith and action must work together for this to be successful for our community.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for that summary. I'm going to Dr. Stokes quickly. How can we improve cross-systems collaboration between schools, child welfare, mental health systems to better impact families impacted by trauma and high service needs to prevent our children from moving to systems, child welfare systems, as well as the criminal justice system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an ever-evolving concept, and thank you for that question. The cross-system collaboration between the schools, the child welfare system, and the mental health systems is an element that is in progress. So some of those things, some of those works are being done, which include embedding counselors and mental health clinicians from other organizations into some of the schools. But I think ways to improve that would be to kind of increase some of the local and state funding, tie some more policy into some of those aspects, because as we know, children may or may not come to school and or leave school with new and different problems, different challenges that they face throughout the day. And of course, also, as we know, our teachers are unrecognized first responders. So that's another aspect of the cross collaboration between those three bodies. So one of the other things I think the funding could do would be to increase the amount of support that is in the schools, as well as extending some of those hours. So a lot of times when the students are in school, 2:30, 3 o'clock, that may be the last time that they could get some help. So having maybe some things like hotlines or maybe some online resources or live chats that they can use can be helpful.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And the last question, Mr. Johnson, we're going to give it to you. We need more clinicians of color working in the field. We also need more practitioners. We know that peers work, the peer model works. And so we are going to be rolling that out. But when you think about health and human services, how can we attract more males of color, Black males, to work in this field?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I think is would be helpful, because I consider myself to be a minority in the field of health and human services. I think it is finding a way to help Black men see themselves in the field, right? And how their unique perspectives and life experiences can actually help to add value to this space. I think many times, no matter what context you look at, men want to be helpful. Black men want to be contributors to our communities and societies. But I think part of the barrier sometimes, at least from my perspective, is helping them or us to see how our unique selves can help contribute to the particular space outside of the majority who are already within the.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So to see themselves in the field, absolutely, absolutely. And we're also working on pay legislation, because when we talk about taking care of a family, we know in human services our pay base and differentials. So thank you, everyone. I can't thank you enough. We're just 5 minutes over time, and we so appreciate each and every one of you. We were able to work on our technology, so the video will be available. That was streamed on our Facebook page. I say thank you for the Patful strategies, information that you shared today, that we know those that were in the room or watching live will leave here and hopefully implement and learn and take advantage of some of the amazing resources in our community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know our tech team, for those that are in the room, will put our evaluation in the room. And for those that may have missed it, we will send it out to you. We can't thank you enough for joining us. Please, 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 next week, we are going to amplify peers. Tierra Springer Love will be your moderator. It will not be me. Tierra Springer Love, we're going to talk about youth peers, adult peers, family peers, and so much more. We want you to join this free series. Share it. Share it in your community. If we are not sharing the information, this is a free educational opportunity that is available to all. It's virtual, so we can reach far and near. So thank you for joining us. And remember that lived experience matters, and it is okay not to be okay, but please take the step to get the help that you need. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Saturday, and look forward to having you join us next week. Have a great day, and thank you, Pascale. Thank you to all of our panel speakers and sponsors today. Have a great day.